this world is the birth and the blossoming and the decay, all of that together, and the shadow and the light and the contrast between that. That's really the full picture. And so for me, the music must have that.
In a private studio in the foothills of the Catalina Mountains, music that can only be described as a soundscape pours through the desert like water from a canyon. Steve Roach is a composer and performer who couples the technology of the electronic age with the instruments of the ancients to create a multi-track world that speaks in a language of feeling.
And I feel more like a painter or a sculptor in terms of spending many hours alone in the studio, the way an artist does, working, mixing colors, looking at your work from different angles and different shapes. So, and I was playing with my hands in that way, painting and sculpting, before I found music.
The mountains, the ocean, but most of all, the desert are the source of Steve's inspiration. He intuitively grabbed for the tools he needed to express his response to the natural world.
The music and the type of sounds I wanted to create, they were still in my imagination and they were still welling up in me. So eventually the instrument came along and I intercepted it at the right moment, and that was 20-something years ago. And I've been growing with the evolutions in technology as well as also stepping back into the distant past, incorporating didgeridoos and clay water pots and pre-Hispanic flutes and percussion and any number of things that I'm drawn to.
Steve Roach is a successful and prolific recording artist, releasing over 30 albums since 1981. He moved to Tucson in 1990 to be in the desert with his wife, Linda Kahanoff, a writer and classically trained musician. Together, they are a team. Linda listens to the music and gives feedback, books concerts, writes press releases, and creates and records poetry that Steve incorporates in his compositions. And though Steve's music has the power to frighten or almost hypnotize the listener, Linda sees a very human musician behind this otherworldly landscape.
I was in my office working on my book on the computer, and because I used to write about music for a living, we get a lot of recordings in the mail still, and a lot of field music recordings, since I wrote a lot about ethnic music from around the world. And sometimes Steve will put it on. He'll go to the mailbox and he'll put it on. And so all of a sudden I heard this incredible chanting that sounded, you know, very much like a shaman calling down the moon, or a hunter from the Laplands. And as I walked over to the doorway, I saw Steve standing there with his headphones on, and he obviously had all of his sounds and the processing of his voice going on inside these headphones, but all I could hear was him chanting into the microphone with his eyes shut. It was at that moment that I realized that you know, that Steve has really come a long way as far as expressing himself both in the electronic realm, but just getting down to the basic beginnings of music, which is the human voice.
Unlike many of his contemporaries in electronic music, Steve Roach frequently gives live concerts. He thinks it's important to keep the music in context, to see how his music affects people, to keep the channel of communication open.
When I create a live concert, I'm like this, whatever type of person you want to call me, going out into a place where people are gathering, and I have all of these containers of different shapes with different atmospheres inside of them, so to speak. And I take the lid off of this one, and this one, and this one, and then I'll close that one up and put the lid back on this one and open this one, and I'm constantly moving through this stream of consciousness flow of sound, and it's different every single night. And I've had people come to 12 concerts in a row, but I do have a roadmap with a beginning, a middle, and an end, but there's always different turns and twists, and the way I create sounds live into what's called a looping machine, which I'll demonstrate for you. The way that happens every night is just like every day is different. There's so many different hats that are helmets and headdresses that are worn through the concert that that's really the again, the satisfaction for me going out live. It's really just been a journey of moving on my intuition, an absolutely instinctual person, the way I'm drawn to things. You know, I could barely get through high school and somehow found my way through to this moment in this room by just, you know, following what Joseph Campbell says, following your bliss and following what really, you know, feeds your soul at a deep level.